The warship Iron Resolve hung in the void like a steel predator waiting to strike, its engines humming with the deep growl of restrained power. Inside its vast corridors, crew members moved with sharp precision, every step echoing the tension of the mission ahead. Human engineer Ethan Cole had been working in the main engine bay when the message came through. The screen flashed red with a single order from the captain's office. Report to cabin 4C immediately. No explanation, no details, just that. Ethan wiped the grease from his hands and made his way through the narrow halls, wondering why he was being moved. His current cabin was fine. Small, yes, but it had been his space for the last 6 months. On a warship, a cabin wasn't just a room, it was a rare piece of privacy. When he reached 4C, the door slid open with a hiss. Inside stood someone he had only seen in briefings, Commander Tvara, an alien from the Varen Dominion. Her tall, slender frame was wrapped in a dark blue uniform, her skin a faint silver sheen under the cabin lights. Her eyes, sharp and reflective, locked on him immediately. You must be Cole, she said in a voice that was smooth but edged with command. And you're my new roommate? Ethan asked, though the word roommate felt ridiculous. He glanced around and froze. The cabin was even smaller than his old one, and there was only one bed. Tvara noticed his hesitation. The ship is crowded for this mission. This is temporary, she said, though her tone made it sound anything but. Ethan stepped inside, the door sliding shut behind him. This is some kind of mistake, he muttered. Humans and Varens don't. We're not exactly known for being friendly bedfellows. Her gaze hardened. I don't like this any more than you do, but the captain has ordered it. We will follow orders. The air between them was heavy, thick with distrust. The last war between humans and Varens had ended only 5 years ago. The scars were still fresh. Ethan's own brother had fought in that war, and the memories still burned. They stood in silence, each evaluating the other. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound. Later that evening, Ethan tried to focus on a report, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the strange situation. Why pair a human and an alien, especially one from a former enemy race, in the same quarters? And why only one bed? It wasn't just inconvenient, it was suspicious. Tvara sat across from him, working on her datapad. Her movements were precise, her posture perfect. Ethan noticed she kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting someone. Finally, he broke the silence. You keep looking at the door, expecting someone? Her eyes flicked up briefly. I am always alert, she said. On a mission like this, you should be too. Before Ethan could reply, the ship's intercom crackled. All crew, report heightened security status. Unknown activity detected near engineering bay. The announcement ended with a sharp tone. Ethan's stomach tightened. The engineering bay was his responsibility. He shot Tvara a look. Let's go. They reached the bay quickly, but security was already there. 2 officers were scanning the consoles while a third pulled a strange, palm-sized device from under a control panel. What is that? Ethan asked. The officer frowned. Sabotage device. Whoever planted it wanted the engines to fail on the next hyperspace jump. Ethan's eyes went to Tvara instinctively. She was already looking at him, the same suspicion mirrored in her gaze. Security didn't say much else, just told them both to stay alert. On the way back to their cabin, neither spoke. The silence was worse than any argument could have been. Back in the room, Ethan locked the door and leaned against the wall. Omion's trying to take this ship down, and since we're the new pair in this little cabin, guess who's going to be the first suspects?
Tvara's expression didn't change. Then we find the real culprit before they find us, she said. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. And how do we do that when we can't even trust each other? She met his eyes steadily. We start by surviving the night. Outside their door, unseen by either of them, a shadow moved in the corridor. Someone was watching their cabin, someone who knew exactly why the human and alien had been forced to share the same bed, and that reason had nothing to do with saving space. The dim lights of the warship's night cycle cast long shadows across the narrow corridor outside cabin 4C. Ethan lay on his side in the bed, eyes open, every creak of the hull sounding louder than it should. Across from him, Tvara sat upright, back against the wall, her silver eyes fixed on the door as if she could will it to stay closed. Neither trusted the other enough to sleep. A soft sound broke the silence, the faint scrape of metal against metal. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. Tavara was already on her feet, silent as a predator. She held up a hand for him to stay still. They both listened. The sound came again, softer this time, as if whoever was outside knew they were being heard. Then, nothing. Tavara moved to the control panel by the door and checked the corridor camera. The screen fizzed with static. The feed had been cut. "That's not normal," Ethan said quietly. She gave a small, sharp nod. Someone tampered with it, which means they were here. Before they could investigate, the ship's alarms blared. "All engineering personnel report to damage control stations." Ethan's pulse jumped. Another attack. He grabbed his tools and ran, Tavara following close behind. The engine bay was chaos. Panels sparking, crew shouting. The same officer from earlier waved them over. "Another device, more advanced this time. Whoever's doing this knows the ship," he said. Inside out. Ethan crouched near the damaged panel. His hands moved fast, isolating circuits. Tavara knelt beside him, working on bypassing the power grid. Their movements were almost in sync, and for a moment neither thought about old wars or distrust, only about saving the ship. The device was disarmed just in time. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good work, engineering team, but the saboteur is still aboard." When they returned to their cabin hours later, exhaustion dragged at their bodies, but the tension was sharper than ever. Ethan locked the door and checked under the bed, then the storage compartments. Nothing. Tavara finally spoke. "Whoever planted these devices wants us to be blamed. They were in our corridor last night, cutting the camera." Ethan frowned. "Why us? We barely know each other." She met his gaze steadily. "Because humans and Varans sharing quarters is unusual. Easy to spin a story that we're colluding." A sudden noise. 3 slow knocks on the door. Both froze. Ethan approached cautiously. "Who's there?" Silence. He glanced at Tavara, who had already drawn a small, sleek alien blade from her boot. He unlocked the door and stepped back. The panel slid open to reveal nothing. Just the empty corridor. But lying on the floor was a folded piece of metal etched with a single line of alien script. Tavara bent to read it. Her eyes narrowed. It says, "2 enter the bed tonight, but only 1 will wake." Ethan's stomach sank. The threat was clear, and whoever wrote it knew exactly where they slept. The lights flickered overhead, and for the first time since he boarded the Iron Resolve, Ethan wondered if the real danger wasn't the enemy out there in the stars, but the one already inside the ship. The message burned in Ethan's mind like a warning he couldn't ignore. 2 enter the bed tonight, but only 1 will wake. The words echoed in the small cabin, turning every shadow into a possible threat. Tavara sat on the edge of the bed, blade still in hand. Her silver eyes reflected the dim light, cold and focused. "We do not sleep tonight," she said. Ethan nodded. Agreed. But inside, he wondered how long they could keep this up. They had been running on fumes since the first sabotage. They took turns watching the door, the silence stretching until it felt unnatural. The hum of the ship was steady, but underneath it, Ethan began to hear something else. A faint, rhythmic tap, like metal fingers against the hull. Tavara heard it too, her head tilted. "Not the ship's systems," she whispered. She moved to the wall, pressing her ear against it. Her jaw tightened. "They're moving in the service ducts." Ethan's mind raced. The ducts ran above and below every cabin, including theirs. Someone could get in without touching the door. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then, a sudden crash as the ceiling panel above the bed fell inward. A dark figure dropped through, landing with predator-like grace. Ethan barely rolled aside before a blade sliced into the mattress where his chest had been. Sparks from the ceiling showered the room, lighting the attacker's face for a split second. A human, eyes wild, wearing an engineer's uniform marked with an insignia Ethan didn't recognize. Tavara was already moving, her blade meeting the attackers in a clash of metal. The sound rang in the small room. Ethan scrambled to his feet, grabbing a wrench from his toolkit. The attacker was fast, striking at Tavara with precise, trained movements. She blocked, countered, but the space was too tight. Ethan swung the wrench, catching the intruder's arm. The man hissed in pain, but didn't stop. The fight crashed into the narrow corridor outside. Alarms began to wail. Crew members turned their heads but didn't interfere, as if they'd been told to stay out of it. Ethan lunged, Tackling the man from behind, they hit the floor hard. Tavara moved in, pressing her blade to the attacker's throat. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man's lips curled into a twisted grin. "It doesn't matter," he rasped. "You're already dead." Before either of them could react, he bit down on something hidden in his mouth. His body went rigid, then limp. A faint hiss of gas escaped from between his teeth. The smell was bitter and chemical. Tavara pulled Ethan back fast. "Suicide capsule," she said. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes scanned the corridor. As if expecting another strike, security finally arrived, but their faces were unreadable. They took the body without a word. Back in the cabin, Ethan locked the door again. His hands were shaking now. "That guy knew exactly where we'd be," he said. "This isn't just sabotage, this is assassination." Tavara's voice was low. "And if they sent one, they will send more." Somewhere deep in the ship, another alarm began to blare, not for sabotage but for intruders on board. And for the first time, Ethan realized the warship Iron Resolve might not be hunting the enemy at all. The enemy might already be here, hunting them. The intruder's body had barely been removed when the real trouble began. By the next morning, whispers followed Ethan and Tavara down every corridor. Crew members stepped aside as they passed, not out of respect, but suspicion. It started with a notice posted on the ship's public log: saboteur suspected to be from engineering personnel recently reassigned to Cabin 4C. No names, but everyone knew who that meant. When they arrived in the engine bay, their security access had been revoked. A guard stood at the door. "Orders from the captain," he said. "You're restricted to quarters unless called." Ethan's temper flared. "You think we planted those devices? We stopped them." The guard didn't answer, just stepped in their way. Back in their cramped cabin, the tension was suffocating. Tavara paced like a caged predator. "Someone is manipulating this ship's chain of command," she said. "If they control the logs and the guards, they control the story." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "So we're trapped in here while the real saboteur moves freely." Tavara stopped pacing, her gaze locking on him. "Unless we move without permission." That night, during the quietest part of the ship's cycle, they acted. Ethan accessed the maintenance hatch under their bed, a narrow tunnel of pipes and cables that ran to the ship's lower decks. Crawling through the cold metal space, they kept their voices low. Halfway through, they heard voices above them. The words were muffled, but one was clear. The name Cole. Ethan froze, listening harder. "Orders are to take them out before the next jump," a voice said. "Both of them." Ethan and Tavara exchanged a look. Then the second voice spoke, colder. "Make it look like an accident and wipe the security feed." They stayed still until the footsteps faded. When they finally emerged from the hatch, they were in a dim, unused storage bay. Dust floated in the beam of Ethan's small light, but in the far corner, a strange glow pulsed faintly. They approached and found a small device wired into the ship's comm system. Its blinking light was slow and steady. Tavara crouched beside it, scanning with her wrist console. Her face darkened. "It's transmitting everything we say in our cabin." Ethan's stomach twisted. "They've been listening to us since the moment we moved in." Before they could disconnect it, the sound of boots echoed in the corridor outside the storage bay. "Too many for them to fight," Tavara whispered. "We can't be caught here. They'll say we planted this." They slipped through another maintenance hatch, heartbeats pounding in the silence. Behind them, the storage bay door slid open and a flashlight beam swept the room. They didn't stop moving until they were deep in the ventilation ducts again. By the time they reached their cabin, the meaning was clear. They weren't just suspects anymore. Someone on this ship had already decided they were guilty, and if they didn't find proof of the real saboteur soon, the next accident might be their own deaths. By now, Ethan and Tavara knew they had only one choice: fight back before the ship swallowed them whole. They needed proof, not suspicion, and they needed it fast. The listening device they had found in the storage bay had been left intact, not destroyed. Instead, Ethan made a few quiet adjustments. Now, anything said inside their cabin would be recorded. But by them, not whoever planted it. Tavara leaned against the wall, her silver eyes glinting in the dim light. "We give them bait. They can't resist," she said. That night, while pretending to have a casual conversation, they spoke loudly about having stolen a copy of the saboteur's plans and hiding it in the maintenance locker near the aft oxygen supply. Ethan made sure his voice carried, knowing their unseen listener would hear every word. Then they waited. Hours later, the ship was silent except for the low hum of engines. Ethan lay on the bed pretending to sleep. Tavara sat near the door, her blade resting across her lap. At exactly 0200 hours, the cabin door's lock clicked softly. A shadow slipped inside, tall, fast, moving with the confidence of someone who had done this before. They didn't even glance at Ethan, heading straight for the maintenance locker mentioned in the fake conversation. Tavara moved first. Silent as a striking snake, her blade was at the intruder's throat before he could take a second step. Ethan rose and flicked on the cabin light. The man froze. A crew technician, one Ethan recognized from engineering. His eyes darted wildly, looking for an escape. Ethan stepped closer. "You've been planting the devices, haven't you?" The man's lip curled. "You think you're clever, human, but you have no idea who you're up against." Tavara's grip tightened. "Then tell us." The technician gave a low laugh. "I don't answer to the captain. I don't answer to you. I answer to the Dominion." The words chilled the air between them. The Dominion. The same alien empire Tavara once fought for, the same enemy humanity still feared. Before they could press further, a deafening blast shook the ship, the lights flickered, alarms screamed. The intruder used the moment to slam his head back into Tavara's face, breaking free. He bolted out the door before Ethan could grab him. They chased him into the corridor, but smoke was already filling the hall. Somewhere nearby, fire suppression systems hissed to life. Crew members ran in all directions, shouting over the alarms. Ethan and Tavara lost sight of him in the chaos, but the damage was done. They now knew for certain this wasn't just a rogue crew member. This was a coordinated infiltration. As they returned to their cabin, an announcement boomed over the intercom. "All crew report to battle stations. Enemy boarding craft detected." Ethan met Tavara's eyes. "Looks like our problem just became everyone's problem." And somewhere deep inside the ship, the real enemy smiled. Because the chaos had only just begun. The warship Iron Resolve shuddered under the impact of enemy fire. Sirens wailed. Red lights flashed along the corridors. The voice of the first officer cut through the chaos. "Enemy boarding craft has latched onto Deck 6. All personnel to defense positions." Ethan and Tavara didn't wait for orders. They ran toward the sound of fighting, the deck vibrating under their boots. Around the corner, they saw crew members exchanging fire with armored figures pushing through the smoke. The enemy's armor was matte black, their visors glowing faint red. They moved in perfect formation. Too perfect. Tavara's voice was sharp. "Dominion shock troops." Ethan ducked behind a bulkhead as a bolt of plasma scorched the wall. "You're saying they're here for the ship?" She shook her head grimly. "No, they're here for us." The shock troops advanced, pushing the defenders back step by step. Tavara leapt into the fray, her alien blade flashing in the emergency lights. She moved with precision, each strike disabling armor joints and weapons. Ethan used his engineering tools like weapons, smashing a shock trooper's visor with a heavy spanner before wrenching a plasma rifle from his grip. They fought their way toward the docking clamp, but something was wrong. The boarding craft wasn't just unloading troops, it was unloading equipment. Large sealed cases were being hauled into the ship, one by one. Ethan shot a glance at Tavara. "That doesn't look like weapons." She scanned the cases quickly, her eyes narrowing. "No, those are demolition charges. They're not here to capture the ship, they're here to destroy it from inside." Before they could act, a voice echoed through the smoke, cold, commanding, and far too familiar. "Stand down, Commander Tavara. You were never supposed to survive this long." Ethan turned toward the sound and saw a tall figure in advanced Dominion officer's armor step forward. His helmet retracted to reveal sharp alien features and eyes like molten gold. Tavara's body went rigid. "General Kale," she said, her voice like stone. The general smiled faintly. "You should have stayed loyal, Tavara. Instead, you crawl in the dirt with humans." Ethan aimed the rifle. "If you came all this way to give speeches, you're wasting your time." Kale's gaze flicked to him. "And you must be the human engineer causing all this trouble. I should thank you. You've made it easier to frame your deaths as an accident." Behind Kale, more charges were being set. The timer lights blinked a slow, deadly rhythm. Ethan muttered, We're running out of time. Tavara took a step forward, her voice low but deadly. Then let's make sure we take their plan apart before it takes this ship apart. Kale tilted his head slightly. I look forward to watching you fail. And with a sharp gesture, he ordered his troops to advance. The corridor erupted into chaos, plasma bolts lighting the smoke-filled air. The timer lights on the charges began to blink faster. They had minutes, maybe less, to stop the destruction and survive the most dangerous enemy either of them had ever faced. The corridor shook under the fury of plasma fire. The timers on the demolition charges blinked faster, counting down toward the death of the Iron Resolve. Ethan fired at the shock troops while Tavara moved like a blade through the smoke, cutting down anyone who got close. They fought toward the first charge, Ethan ripping open the casing with his bare hands. His eyes scanned the mess of wires. I can disarm this one, he shouted. Do it, Tavara barked, blocking 2 incoming strikes with her blade. The energy sparked off her weapon, scorching the wall beside her. Ethan's fingers worked quickly, his breath coming in sharp bursts. One wrong move and they'd all be vapor. He found the power core and yanked it free. The timer froze at 8 seconds. That's 1 dot, he said, but there were still 3 more. They pushed forward, ducking under enemy fire. The second charge was hidden behind fallen debris. Tavara knelt beside it, her alien hands moving with speed and skill. She glanced at Ethan. This design is Dominion military. Only trained officers can disarm it. Then it's yours, he said, keeping the enemy at bay with bursts from the plasma rifle. The moment she pulled the disarm pin, a voice came from behind, smooth and cold. Impressive, but this ends now. General Kale stepped into view, his golden eyes. Locked on Tavara, he moved with lethal speed, striking her sword aside and slamming her into the wall. She gasped but didn't fall. Meeting his gaze, she spat a single word, traitor. Kale smiled. To my people? Never. To you? Always. He swung for the killing blow. Ethan didn't think. He charged, slamming into Kale with all his weight. They hit the deck hard, the rifle skidding away. Kale was stronger, faster. But Ethan fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. His fists connected again and again until Kale roared in fury, throwing him off. Tavara seized the moment, grabbing her blade and driving it deep into the gap in Kale's armor. The general's eyes widened, his voice a whisper. You've chosen your side. He collapsed, his armor hissing as its systems failed. There was no time to celebrate. The last 2 charges were armed, their timers blinking red. Ethan grabbed one while Tavara went for the other. 30 seconds, he yelled. They worked in sync, hands moving faster than thought. Sweat dripped into Ethan's eyes, his fingers slipping on the wires. Done, he shouted, just as Tavara called. Finished. The blinking stopped. The corridor fell silent except for the hiss of smoke and the distant sounds of the ship's crew securing the decks. Later, in their cabin, the captain's voice announced over the intercom, "The Iron Resolve is secure, thanks to the actions of Engineer Ethan Cole and Commander Tavara." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted. Tavara stood beside him, silent for a long moment. Then she said, "We began as enemies forced into the same room." He looked up at her, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "And the same bed." She inclined her head slightly, the faintest curve of a smile appearing. "Now perhaps we share more than that." For the first time since boarding the warship, they both lay down in the same bed. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to, and in the quiet hum of the Iron Resolve, the bond between human and alien was no longer about orders, survival, or suspicion. It was about trust, forged in fire and sealed in the narrow space they once resented.